part two. You're here with William. More money, no problems, with attorney Natalie Green, discussing estate planning. Well, thank you for coming back. We were just really discussing the different aspects of estate planning and also how life insurance goes into it. One thing I do want to say is I do get a lot of questions about specific brands like Gerber and this and that. I would tell people to always come and talk to a professional, because there are very different nuances to certain policies that people don't know. So to speak, they all come out and say, well, you could build cash in that policy. A lot of people don't understand the terms and how that policy is built. Not all policies you can just pull cash out without that policy lapsing. Some policies have things in them that when you withdraw cash, it will directly affect the policy. So it's worth your time to really sit down with a professional like myself and walk through those terms and understand the policy. You don't know how many times I sit with people and they'll say, well, I have insurance. And I'll say, well, explain it to me. Why was it set up this way? Do you know if you pull cash out, what's the rate? Do you know if you got to pay the interest back? I don't know.
How does it affect the overall performance of the policy?
Of it. A lot of people don't know that. And I understand, because that's not their expertise. And most people,
but it's their money.
Exactly. But it amazes me. Exactly. I always say to people, how can you not know about your money? It's amazing, because my first question is always, what's your number? Well, what do you mean, what's your number? What's your number? Well, how much you get in Social Security? I don't know. I'm like, well, that's the baseline.
Right.
So you always have to know the baseline. How much are you going to need in retirement?
So when you go to meet with somebody, do you give them sort of a checklist of what they might need to know before they sit down with you? Or you kind of go in and meet them where they are and see where they are?
I like to meet them where they are, because the funny thing is, one thing I found about finances, everybody has an opinion on the stock market. Finance is everything.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
It's amazing how, you'll meet with a business owner who has it together, but they don't have anything set up.
Because they're babysitting the business.
Because they're babysitting the business. I've come to realize that a lot of people are great at their business, but not running a business from the back office.
Right.
Okay.
Lawyers are very much like that.
And physicians, I've met a lot of doctors like, your burn rate is so high. What is your burn rate? How much money you spend in a month? If you're making $2 million a year, oh, that's beautiful. But if you're spending $3 million,
not good.
It's not good. I mean, It's nothing I can really do for that, unless, again, you want to change your habits and make sacrifices.
Or audit your money.
Or audit.
Because
exactly.
Why is it that high?
Exactly. Well,
who's in charge of the money?
Well, you can see with the houses and the cars and the, it's just going out the door.
Yeah.
So it's just amazing to me when we sit down and we talk to people, and enlightening, because I love helping people. I love helping people realize where they want to go, or assisting them to where they want to go. Because my job is really to assist. I often tell clients, it's a partnership. This is not me coming and telling you, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. No, it's about me working with you and helping you understand where you can go if we just get a plan, and stick to the plan. Now, every plan has to be, how I see it, you have to have benchmarks, 5-year, 7-year, and 10-year. And if we're not on a trajectory to hit those benchmarks, then we have to sit down and ask ourselves why.
Yeah.
Because I really feel that if we're not hitting those benchmarks, I'm not doing my job.
But life happens. And
life
happens.
Change. Definitely. Life happens. Things change. But also that's why it's important to meet. It's important to be open. I'm really
even on the ugly stuff.
All the ugly stuff. I sat with a client last month, and we had this whole plan. And I said to him, I sat with him and his wife. I like meeting with couples, so everybody's on the same page.
That's hard.
I love it, because
it's hard for estate planning too, because you see if a couple, especially if it's a blended couple, there's a lot of tiptoeing around that. We can have a whole other discussion about that. But you have the spending you have a couple of like the spender and the saver kind of thing. But then when they have children, even if they're their joint children, but we need to help our children with everything. We need to give them everything. We work so hard to give them all, free school. It's like, and the other parent's like, I didn't have that. Why that? I didn't have that. Why were you doing that? I'm who I am today because I had to go work for those things. Why are we doing that to them? Why are we enabling them? Or, just, it's just such a different philosophy. How do you reconcile that when you have couples that are so divergent on how they look at that?
Well, one thing I love to do is I'll put out a big piece of paper and we'll write down the numbers, the salaries, everything. And you'd be amazed when I have people write out their debt. If you have a couple and combined they're making $500,000, but yet they start writing out their debts and they visually see how much money.
Do their jaws drop?
Yeah, their jaws drop because numbers don't lie. My biggest thing also with my clients, I remember, people can lie to you. Contracts don't lie. Numbers don't lie.
Statements.
One plus one is going to be 2. If you meet somebody that's going to tell you different, you need to walk away. So when people actually see the numbers, they're amazed. Wait a minute, I'm spending how much? Wait, the school's going to cost us this? And then I'll turn to them and say, okay, these are your numbers, remember. I'll say, when do you plan on retiring? Then they look at each other and they're like, okay, we got to make some changes. Because I
guess we're not retiring.
Yeah, because once you see those numbers, and the numbers are showing you how much you will actually spend in a month on non-essential things. Also,
those little subscriptions.
Going out to dinner constantly. I had a couple, they were going to, I think it was, I can't remember the restaurant, but they were going like 3 times a week.
DoorDash.
But the thing was, I'm like, you're spending how much money just going to this restaurant every week? And they were doing well, but my thing is this: if you took that same money and put it over here, you'd grow an asset.
Or you could be out of debt.
You'd be out of debt because I'm like, well, you could pay your house off. And
it hits them hard, doesn't it?
It hits them hard, and these are the real conversations that I'm so honored to have with people and blessed that people receive it well when I talk to them. I've never had a client say to me, "Oh no, I can't deal with this." I always had clients that say to me, something, this is ridiculous.
But I think it's the way you deliver that message to people, because I know that you've given me even like, you got to do this, you got to do that. And it always comes from a caring place, because you don't ever dictate or bark at people. It never comes from, there's no judgment when you give people advice. That's the beauty of it. It's like, if you want to get here and you want to do these things, this is what you need to do. Yeah. And it's not well, you're a bad person because you got all this debt. It's like, that's life. People just get into debt because they lost a job or their pay got, screwed up. I can't even imagine the people that were at TSA and have a whole month of not having their income, the fallout of that for months and years, that harm is going to cause an entire sector of people. I couldn't imagine. And so when you don't come with judgment, I can see why everyone's receptive to that feedback from you.
Yeah, the big thing is I always want to let people know that it doesn't matter what you did in the past. Everybody has a past. Everybody has a past.
Yeah.
It's what we do going forward.
Yeah.
I mean, I meet people say, well, in my past, I did this, I did that. That's fine. I said, but I'm not here to judge you on your past. I'm here to let's move forward. Because if we don't move forward, and we keep looking back, then, your mind is not going to be open to that.
You're talking about like insurance and people not knowing what they have. You know what really kind of blows my mind? When I talk to people about what they have, when I do the consultation for estate planning, I kind of get a feel for, what are your assets? Do you work? Does your spouse work? What kind of things do you have? And I do ask them about life insurance, because sometimes they'll have cash value life insurance, term insurance. So many times people will say, well, I have insurance through my job. And I got to tell you this case, and it really was one of those things that I kind of kick myself now that I didn't push a little harder. But sometimes clients will put that, wall up and they'll say, don't, really, please don't go there. And I had a gentleman, he had a wife who immigrated to the United States. So I think she had a green card, like she had a permit to work. She wasn't a U.S. citizen. And they owned a home and they had a child together. And when I got to that part of my consultation, like, so tell me about your insurance situation. Do you have life insurance? Does she have life insurance, to create money so if something happens to you, you can take care of this child? I have life insurance through my job. Well, what's the death benefit? X number of multiples of my salary. Usually that's pretty common. Okay. And, do you have any permanent insurance? So that's usually how I ask, insurance outside of work. No, but I mean, I'm pretty satisfied with what I have. Just kept pushing a little bit and they kept giving me the nope, I'm good kind of thing. It's like, understood. And so then we did the trust, we got everything set up. 1 year later, I'm getting a call from his wife. Well, my husband didn't tell us he had prostate cancer. And he passed away. Oh, no, this was before he passed away. My husband has prostate cancer. And when he let his company know, his job, they didn't lay him off. They didn't go that route. They didn't fire him because that would have been illegal. Mm-hmm. They eliminated his position. Mm-hmm. And they did it when he was there 11 months into the job. And then I said, well, life insurance is usually portable. Mm-hmm. Was the life insurance portable? Did you have that conversation with HR? Do you understand what that means? Portability means you can take that insurance with you mm-hmm. from the employer and you got to pay for it yourself, but at least you have it.
Yep.
Because once he had the cancer, not necessarily insurable, right? Yep. But that's the beauty of group insurance is like you're insurable whether you're sick or not when you show up. You get a job, you might be sick, but you're insurable, you're part of the group. So that's when they said, well, this particular policy for this employer had a 1 year vesting requirement for the insurance to be portable. And they flippin' knew it. 1 month later, they would have had to have given him that policy portability. 11 months, they had nothing. Nothing.
It's sad. And you're right. I always tell people, get something outside of your job.
Just anything. And that's anything you need to bury the man because she didn't work.
Yeah, anything, get something outside of your job. And even if you don't have a lot of money, let's start out with something small because at least you have something. And that's the biggest thing. You have to start off, have something. Don't put it off. No. Just get something because a lot of times also the life insurance through your job may not be portable. Mm. And the thing is, if it is portable, what happens is the premium jumps.
Oh, yeah.
So because most of the time it's 2 to 3 times your salary.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, if you leave that company, you don't have it. And you've paid, a lot of times it's really pennies on the dollar. So
it's so small.
It's so small. But once you leave, now you got to start over. So just have something. So if that day were to happen, you're fine. You just keep rolling on. But again, it's really just educating people, talking to people, constantly talking to people, helping them understand the importance of their life. I mean, it's hard sometimes, and I battle with this. Some people, I'm like, I have to convince you to take care of yourself. Mm. I have to convince you to want to make sure that your family is safe. Like, my thing is you can't have a $300,000 house and a $25,000 life insurance policy and 2 kids. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. I'll say, who sold you this policy? My biggest thing is, we'll talk about this in depth at another time, is I've run across a lot of people, older people, who will have like 8 policies for $1,000, $900, $700. I mean, literally like policies like that. And I'm like, ma'am, who sold you all these policies?
Those are the door-to-door guys,
the guys that come by. how much can you afford this month? I can afford $25. No, that'll buy you $800 worth of policy. I had one lady up in Gainesville. Literally, she had like 8 policies, and they all totaled maybe $5,000. And I said, ma'am, do you have any kids? She said, yeah. I said, well, can you have all your kids come over to the house? So I don't like going to elderly people's house without their kids, so everybody's on the same page. That's why.
Oh my gosh, that's so smart.
Yeah, so even with clients, I want the husband and wife there, so everybody's on the same page. And I sat with the kids, and I'm like, this is what your mother has. And the daughter said to me, she's like, yeah, you're right. I was wondering about that. I was like, yeah, and it was
they always imagine it's a much bigger death benefit too. They always hear insurance, they think it's huge money.
What was even crazier, think about this. You have $1,000 policy, right? That they got when they were in their 20s. They're now in their 70s. How many times over you think they've paid that policy off?
Because it's an ongoing payment.
I take out, and what I do is I take out my computer. I pull Excel up. I put their premium in that they started 30 years ago, and I show them how much they've paid for a policy for $1,000. One lady paid $8,000 into a $1,000 policy because they just pay it. It comes out of their check monthly, their bank account monthly. So and they're old, they
forget about
it. They forget about it. And this is why I say to people: know your numbers, know what your parents have too. And I put a lot of pressure on my friends sometimes, and on myself and on some of my clients and colleagues, that you got to know what your parents have too.
Oh my gosh.
My
because
mother,
they could become your issue. It will become your issue.
Well, the
later.
thing is, they're paying all this money out, and they don't know. I know some parents, they don't want you knowing their business. But
yeah.
But my mother had a policy because she worked for IBM a long time back in the day, back when you left with full benefits and stuff like that. But she said, "Oh, I have a policy." And I looked at it. I'm like, "Ma, this policy you have, they're basically taking the cash. It's no good anymore because the cash value is gone. So basically, that's why it's going up every month." Mm-hmm. And she said, "I didn't realize because it was just coming out of her check. She didn't think about it. So we canceled it." But the thing is, we have to know what our parents have too, because there are a lot of people out there, parents, grandparents, who have like 7 policies. I tell people, you don't need 5 or 6 different policies. You just need the right policies. Mm-hmm. And again, it's understanding how those policies work. It's understanding if I take money out of that policy, what will happen? What type of policy? What's the intricacies of that policy? If you get a policy that's tied directly to the market, then why would you get a policy tied directly to the market? That means you could lose the whole policy.
Or does it have a zero floor policy?
Not if it's like a VUL.
Yeah. VUL being a variable
universal life. You can lose the whole
variable.
thing.
It can go all the way up, but also all the way down.
And there's no floor.
So floor being like
Zero.
Some of them are, if the market goes past negative, then you won't get anything from it. You just stay where you are.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of floors I've seen could be like 0.25 or something like that, but at least you're not losing money.
But if it has a zero floor and you have also a contractual rate, don't you get the contractual rate?
Not if it's tied directly to the market. That is a contractual agreement.
So you either get the market index, the index from the market, or you get your contractual rate.
It gets
one or the other.
Yeah. But the thing is, so it's understanding what you have, and when I sit with people, that's why I say bring it all out.
The work related insurance, I found that interesting. Like someone I know, they got cancer, they got lung cancer, and they had worked for a company that was like a factory, like a tire factory type of company here in Georgia. And they had short and long-term disability and life insurance, group life. And it was interesting because they didn't want to really kind of pick my brain, but then finally they broke down because they wanted to go into, I think, a study or something, some sort of a study to see if maybe their cancer could be treated in some drug study or whatever. And there was a buy-in. I was like, that seems kind of odd, but okay, let's see if we can find you some money in this policy. Because if you have doctors that will write a letter to say you're terminal and you present that letter to the life insurance policy, they will accelerate the death benefits and give you half the certain
benefits,
amount. This one, they were giving her half of the death benefit because she was terminally ill.
Yes.
And so she was going to use that money to get into this trial, this drug trial, to see if it could help her.
Okay.
But what was interesting is because the reason she had continued healthcare coverage and that life insurance policy, the only reason she had that coverage continue, even though she wasn't working, was because she had short and long-term disability that she bought. And because she had short and long-term disability, it gave her a little bit of money, and she had that little bit of money to pay for her premium for her health insurance. And a lot of people don't realize, like, if you get very, very sick and you can't work, you're not going to have any money to pay for any kind of health insurance.
Yeah, and even going into that long and short-term disability, I always tell people, find out if you can buy it from your job, if it's portable when you leave your company. Because long-term disability is huge. That's the one that a lot of people don't really think about. And that's another product that I do sell because it's so huge. So say I have a physician that's making, say, he's making a couple of mil, so he needs $30,000 a month to survive if he doesn't work. Okay, well, your disability you have through your job may only pay you, it may be 80% the first, say, 2 months or 3 months.
The short term?
Short term, but then it drops. It drops. They're not going to pay you.
But don't you have to be disabled for a certain period of time before anything will kick in?
It depends.
Okay.
So what I say to them, I say, okay, if you say you need X amount of dollars a month, and we look at your policy through your job, and they're going to pay you, say, $15,000 a month, and you need another $15,000, then that's when I go out and I'll find a policy. I'll write them a disability policy to make up for the other 15. So that's huge.
So you have a separate disability policy on your own.
Exactly.
Your personal, is that like an Aflac type stuff was back in the day?
No. So right now, I mean, there are companies out there who have phenomenal disability policies. Phenomenal. I mean, there's certain companies I don't even deal with. I don't even say they're my competition. That's one of them. But if you want like a really good disability policy, there are policies out there that are amazing that will pay. They just pay. Also, you can write within those policies. It's called, it's a rider, and I can't remember the exact name, but it's almost like a premium recall that you can pay this rider, and say you've been paying for disability for like 20 years.
And you're never disabled.
You can get all your premiums back.
Is that like, okay, so I've heard of hybrids, so maybe this is something that you've heard of, something about like a hybrid long-term care type policy.
Okay, so
what is that?
So, and there are different policies out there. There are policies that you can have a life insurance policy, and you can have a long-term care rider on it.
Right.
That's
very common. That's very common, right?
On some policies, on some companies, not every company has it. Then you have standalone long-term care.
But those are very expensive usually, right?
It depends when you get it. I mean,
because I remember when I had to do my licensing for life insurance, we had to do this long-term care class. And then when you have to really look at it and building a long-term care policy, they ask you per diem how much you expect the policy to cover. And when you're quoting that, it's incredible when they go, oh, well, $100 a day. So that's $3,000 a month. When you look at what it costs these days to be in nursing home care and everything, $3,000 doesn't buy you anything.
Yeah, but that's why you want to start when you're young with disability. I mean,
for disability, but even long-term care policies, it's incredible what they won't cover.
It can get up there.
I've had clients that come to me because they are having so many problems dealing with long-term care policies that they bought 25 years ago.
Yeah.
They've been paying into it, and they say, my mom has paid $600,000 into this policy, and every time we try to get her on claim, they give us another reason why she's not on claim. She can't see, she can barely cook, she can't do these things, we're worried she's going to burn herself trying to cook food, and she's too proud to tell them what she can't do. I said, well, that's the problem.
Yeah.
You're sugarcoating what she needs help with. You need to
Yeah.
say she's going to burn herself.
Yeah.
She's going to fall down.
You got to put
She
that
can't-
stuff in writing.
You have
and
to put
everything.
all those
Stuff in
things down
writing,
and
yeah.
then back it up with her doctors.
Yep.
And then finally, we flipped it around and said, this woman really does need to be in long-term care. Finally, they put her on claim, but they need to hire a lawyer and get the lawyer to rattle their cage and say, you guys are violating the terms of this agreement after she paid you more than $500,000.
Yeah, well, and that's important too. Why it's important to do your research on any type of company. And if somebody's just coming around, I say don't do it. When you see people on TV saying, "Oh, for X amount of dollars, you'll be guaranteed for life with this," it's very important to sit down and understand what that policy is and what it does, because not all policies are built the same.
So, people can set up estate plans whether they're married to each other or not married to each other. And, I'm licensed here in Georgia and I'm licensed in Tennessee also. I don't really practice in Tennessee actively. But in Georgia, we don't have common law marriages. So you would have to actively choose to include somebody in your estate plan if you're not married to them. And this, you're allowed to do that. You can name whoever you want
You
as your
as a
beneficiary.
trustee or a beneficiary?
As a beneficiary to a will, for example,
Okay.
or even as a trustee. I've had that where someone's really, really close to someone and they want to include them in the estate plan.
Okay.
But we find a lot of times when there's problems or troubles, when they come to me for probate, usually it's something where there was a will or there maybe wasn't a will, and someone older has someone come up and suddenly they have a new friend. And they suddenly have someone that is helping them. And who's this new person in my grandfather's life that's now living in their house? And there are these predatory people that just pop in.
Yes.
That's why trusts really do help, because once you establish the trust and the property is transferred into that trust, them removing it from the trust is a little bit more difficult, because oftentimes if they've lost capacity and they start inviting strange people into their life, it's a little more difficult for them to accurately remove it from the trust if they've lost capacity. So, that makes it something that does help when someone loses capacity, because you can have the new trustee step in and control things from there. But so when you look at estate planning with trust, capacity is a huge part of it.
Okay, and I know one time we talked and you explained to me why it was so important also to have a trust for a family, because if, God forbid, something happens and the husband becomes incapacitated, the wife, she can still make changes. She doesn't need him to make changes to the house or sell the house or things like that.
Right.
But if she's not on the deed, or how does that work?
Well, if you don't have a trust, and let's say you just own a property and one of the spouses is on the deed, but both of them are on the loan. The person who might be on the loan who was not on the deed, if the person who was on the deed passes away, you might be on the loan. You can talk to the bank and whatever, but you're not going to be able to do anything with the house. You don't own it.
Oh, wow.
So you can own a house. You can be obligated to pay a mortgage and not own the property, in Georgia at least. And you just be stuck having to go into probate. And so, that's why you set up these types of estate plans where you have a trust, and that means it survives the person, even the people that set it up. So, like, I had a client that just recently, she had a lot of things she wanted to achieve. She wanted to set up, she wanted to do essentially legacy planning. So we create these things called legacy trusts.
Okay.
So a legacy trust, the way we set them up is it's designed to last multiple generations, but it's essentially a pool of money from which multiple beneficiaries are going to draw from.
Okay.
And so the difference from a typical trust is where you would set up and you say, these are my beneficiaries. You're going to have a certain set of people, and then you're going to leave it there's a term of art called per stirpes. And per stirpes is a Latin phrase that means by the root. So that means that if you and your wife set up a trust and you have two sons, but let's say when the second one of the two of you passes away, maybe one of your sons passes away contemporaneously with you at the same time, or predeceased you because of illness or an accident. But the son that passed away had 2 sons. His share doesn't get bypassed to him if you do it per stirpes. His children will receive his share. So it still becomes a 50-50 split after you pass. The second of you passes away. One goes to your son, 50%, and then the other 50% gets shared 25 and 25 to your 2 grandsons in that scenario.
Okay.
And if the difference between that and, say, a dynasty trust is it just goes into one pool, and your son, grandchildren, they all have an opportunity to use that money for whatever the trust dictates it can be used for.
Oh, okay.
And then the idea is that money is continually invested and grown so that multiple generations can...
And that's a dynasty.
Yes, can access it.
With a dynasty trust, is it running strictly off of life insurance policies, or is that money invested? How does that work?
No, that can be any kind of assets. It could be just one big family home. It could be a home that, has always been in the family. And typically in Georgia, you put those in place so they can last 99 years. Or there's a rule against perpetuity. So essentially it's a complicated thing with property law, but generally speaking, multiple generations can have access to that asset.
Okay. Interesting. And far as the legacies, so the difference between a legacy trust and a dynasty trust is a legacy trust.
They're essentially the same.
Okay.
Yeah. Legacy being that I'm establishing this now for multiple generations to come.
Okay.
Dynasty being how that money is pulled together so that multiple generations can access it and use it.
Oh, okay. But they're still funded the same way.
You can fund it however you wish. You can fund it with hard assets. Once those assets are in there, they can be liquidated.
Okay.
So let's say you have the main house that the family owns, or maybe you own multiple homes and you don't want them bickering over, well, who's going to get the house who's getting the beach house? Who's getting the mountain house? Who's getting the main house?
Okay.
At that point, you can just dictate it's all getting liquidated. And from there, that money needs to buy life insurance policies on all the beneficiaries at that time who are insurable.
Okay.
And at that point, then that money, the trust is owning the policy. The trust becomes the beneficiary of the policy.
Okay, then it just keeps...
You want to keep it replenishing the money, and then there's a trustee that trustee then can hire any professionals they wish to manage the money.
Okay.
And so even though there's life insurance policies in there, they can also have a money manager that can manage a stock portfolio and can manage rental properties, or say, you know what, we don't like the risk of the stock market. We want something more solid. We'll go buy into a portfolio of rental properties, or we'll buy franchises. We'll buy 3 or 4 Popeyes franchises, or anything really.
And the person they hire, does a trust pay that person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the trust can have payroll and everything? How does that?
Yes. Yeah, it can. If it generates, if there's money in there to pay them, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
And then at that point, let's say after you and your wife would pass and all that money goes into the trust, at that time, the trust is going to have its own tax ID number.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Okay. While you're alive, it's going to use your tax ID numbers because it's a pass-through entity. The IRS is like, well, if you could revoke it, then what's the use of getting a different tax ID number?
Gotcha.
And we can have a whole other topic on non-revocable trusts because it's very, very different and why people use them. But most of the time, people are going to be setting up revocable trusts because if you have a mortgage on a house, you cannot set up a non-revocable trust. It has to be.
And before we go forward, can you explain the difference between irrevocable and...
Yes. Okay. So a revocable trust means that you can change your mind. You can put things in the trust. You can take things out of the trust. You can change who the beneficiaries are. You can change who the trustees are. You can change who gets what. You can change who gets nothing. And so it's very, very flexible.
Okay.
And the reason that you're sort of limited when you have a mortgage is, the bank has an interest in that house. They have a secured interest in whatever money they're owed. They own that house up to that amount. They have a lien on it, essentially. So they have a right, based on the security deed, to say, hey, if you transfer ownership of this house out of your name, we get to be paid regardless.
Okay.
Now, there is a federal law called the Garn-St. Germain Act, And it says a lot of different things, but the key point to remember about estate planning is it says, unless otherwise prohibited by law, usually in the security deed, it says that the banks cannot penalize somebody for doing estate planning. And as long as there's a reversion right, kept in that trust agreement, as long as you can revert or undo the thing that you're doing when you transfer it, no problem. The government, that bank cannot penalize them for it.
Okay.
And the federal law essentially is saying, look, bank, you can't tell them that they have to pay the note off just because they did some estate planning.
Got you. Okay.
Because the estate planning is something they're doing that they have a right to do.
Yep.
You can always still go get them. So one key thing for people to remember is when you have a revocable trust, one that you can change because you have the power to change it, you also have no creditor protection. So a lot of people they get very hot on TikTok and they watch all these things and go, I want to hide everything from my creditors and I want to, own nothing and control everything. Well, you really don't, you have to own it. You have to truly own it. And if you don't own it outright, you can't do that. And when you do put it into a non-revocable trust, you aren't the trustee anymore. You have to have somebody you trust who's not a subordinate, not an employee, not one of your kids. You have to find somebody completely separated from you to get the true asset protection.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty different. It's a whole different beast, but that's the difference. So a non-revocable trust, you are essentially transferring ownership to a trustee, to a trust, and you're saying, not mine. I want to reserve the benefits of using and owning it or using it and enjoying that thing. So you can have a house that you can put into a non-revocable trust. A trustee will manage it. It's for your benefit. But when you pass away, there's predetermined beneficiaries that are going to receive it.
Oh, wow. So once you do that, there's no change in it.
No.
Wow.
But people will do that during life, say, for example, because they want to have certain things reserved or it's a during life gift that they don't want part of their estate if they expect to have estate taxes.
Okay.
So before the laws changed and the estate tax window went way up, it was set to sunset and be reduced. So some people were looking at tax issues for their estate. Now it's back up to
beneficiaries.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you had a house that was worth a whole lot of money, it was paid off, but you knew you promised it to your daughter kind of thing, you're going to just transfer it to a trust. You'll still live in it. You still, take care of it, pay bills to keep it up. But as soon as you pass, because it's in the trust itself says now it goes to the daughter when that person's gone.
Oh, so is there no real technical transfer of value?
There's a transfer of value to the trust, yes.
To the trust.
Right.
Okay, so so that money goes to the house will go to the daughter, the asset. Would she have to pay so she wouldn't have to pay any taxes on that? How does that work?
Well, I don't want to get too deep.
Yeah.
We're not going to get into. Let's not get into a tax discussion. Because there's so many nuances.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to get into tax discussions. But essentially, what they'll be doing is trying to reduce what they own at the end of their life.
Okay.
So that it changes the numbers.
That makes sense.
And the numbers are what determines whether they have a taxable estate or not.
Oh, because if the house stays under the mother's name, and God forbid something would have happened to her, basically she owned that asset.
And it'd be part of the countable estate.
Estate,
depending on where it is, anything over a certain amount gets taxed, anything under a certain amount is exempt.
Owns it, is technically essentially outside.
She didn't own it after that.
She didn't own it, and since it was irrevocable, it was no.
As of whenever she transferred it, she lives in it, but she doesn't own it.
Almost like a third party.
Right, which means when you have a granny who is bounded and determined she's still going to drive when she's 75 years old and she's no business driving. I've had clients like that too. That's when you want to make sure the house gets out of her name, because when she goes driving down, Peachtree, not knowing what she's doing, clips somebody. Oh Lord, they
go after her. Oh yeah,
they'll go after her, but she don't own the house anymore.
Okay.
Because that's when you have true asset protection, when you don't own it.
That is true. So you're right. So when you see people talking about, I want to put everything in trust, I don't want to have anything under my name, so to speak, it's really just they are not explaining
they're not truly understanding the implications of it.
Okay.
You're not going to get to say when you get to sell it. You're not really going to get to say who comes and goes. You know, there's a lot of restrictions on that. You know, unless you know and have some things that you can bake into it, you're going to have a lot of restrictions. But when you're doing it in contemplation, the fact that, you know, you're at the end of your life, or you're getting closer to the point where you know what you have, you know what you need, you know what you don't want, you can essentially make those decisions. And then there's people that make those decisions based on needing to qualify for Medicaid.
Yes, that's that. Yeah,
and that'll be a whole other discussion too.
Yeah, because it's funny. It's interesting. Because I remember once my mother told me, she said a lot of people get rid of their assets when they go into a home, so it appears that they don't have.
But they're doing it too late.
Okay.
Because if they go into the home and then they transfer those assets, and then they go on to Medicaid, what ends up happening is if they get onto Medicaid when they go into the home, if they qualify for some other reason, let's say they qualify because they have renal failure.
Okay.
All right. So there's certain ways you can get onto Medicaid, even if you have a lot of assets. And some of those are things like you have renal failure, end stage renal failure, like your kidneys are gone and you're always you have to do dialysis to survive. They'll put you on Medicaid so that you can get dialysis. But that doesn't mean that the things that are in your estate are going to be available for your family, because the government will take a lien. It's called a Medicaid recovery, estate recovery. They will come back against your estate and say, you know what, when we took care of your mom when her kidneys failed, it cost us $600,000. So we're going to take a lien against anything that she might have owned. Oh, and then the family goes, she didn't own anything. She transferred all of her name. They go, yeah, but she did that inside of 5 years, so we want it. So they will still try. And even if, you know, I have a situation with someone who left a house to family members except for the person who had Medicaid. And they said, well, that person can live in the house until they pass away. And they did. And the government still, they don't even read the deed. They still think this lady had something in her estate, and they're coming at my client going, $400,000. It's like, she didn't own anything. $400,000. Time and time again, they keep sending me a letter. I'm like, she didn't own anything. Sorry.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
So, you know, it's just those types of things that there's so much confusion. You get the government portion involved when you're dealing with Medicaid.
Yes.
A lot of people don't understand the Medicare programs when they turn 65. I mean, there's a lot to that as well that goes into estate planning. Yeah, well, I mean, they come to me to say, well, I'm at this age and they just expect these things to be there for them, but they don't understand the implications of what it's going to cost, which one to choose, what happens when they make certain decisions, and how it's going to cost them money in their estate later. So estate planning, you know, for me is, yes, we'll set up the legal structure, but that's why I like to bring in financial advisors, because they don't understand the money part of it.
Yes.
And it's not for me to do all of that, because I create the box of what their stuff's going to be in, how they protect it, but they still need to have that's the house, but the financial foundation has to be there.
Yes.
Because the house won't be able to sit on anything if there's no financial foundation to keep it up.
Yes.
And so that's why it's important
to work in collaboration. And that's another thing, working with people who have a good circle, so to speak, because not everybody knows everything. And, and that's why I think it's important to have a phenomenal estate planner, a good CPA, a good mortgage broker person that you can bring in, and we can sit down and we all go over everything, and we almost build the structure for them. Because if some people will have you believe that I can take care of this, I can take care of that. And I'm like, no, that's not how it works. I said, everybody has their wheelhouse, you know, and we're talking about your money. We're talking about your life. We're talking about your legacy. We're talking about your dynasty, you know, and there's not one person who can do it all. So,
and if they say they can, they're going to do one of them poorly.
Exactly. I want to ask you, what is your what is your process, so to speak, when you meet a client? And can you kind of walk us through what you sit down? What do you do to start the process going?
So usually we'll get involved when someone will either go to our website, nataliegreen.com,
Say that
and they
again?
can nataliegreen.com.
Excellent.
And it's just like it sounds, green like the color. There's no
Okay.
E at the end. And there's a contact us form, and they can just fill that out and ask for, probate, estate planning, guardianship, conservatorship, any of the different things that we do. And leave us a message there. My assistant will reach back out to them, or they can call our office, and that's 770-609-9529. Or just Google us. Just Google Natalie Green Estate Planning Atlanta, and it'll pop up. And our main office is in Woodstock. We also have satellite offices that we visit in Conyers, in the Cumberland Mall area, Johns Creek. That's we try and keep something in all four corners of the metro area, just in case we have clients that don't want to travel to our Woodstock office where I'm based out of. But when we get someone that wants to visit with me, then they can come in for an in-person consultation. But most people are really busy. Atlanta traffic is awful. And so a lot of times I'll either do a Zoom consultation or a phone call consultation where we can sit down and talk about different things. So what I usually ask them about, what brought you to this process? Because if I just say, tell me about you and all these different things, there's some reason that they decided now's the time.
Yes.
And sometimes somebody's sick. And if they're sick or there's something like that going on, I want to fast track them, because who knows how badly they're sick. Sometimes people will minimize.
Yes.
Even though all the family knows that they're sick, they know how sick they are.
Exactly.
And they may not share it.
Exactly.
And they'll be calling me together. And the one who's ill, they sometimes they just know. And they won't tell, because they don't want to freak everybody out. They don't want to alarm everyone. So I try to fast track them and get them in and out within, a week or two.
Okay.
So, they get to jump the line kind of.
Okay.
I interview them to find out, their family structure, what their concerns are, what types of things they do own and have.
Okay.
And what are their biggest concerns about transferring those assets upon passing. Because some people, they just want to do quick and easy. I just want a will. And for some people that might work. But for most people, they're going to need a trust.
Got it.
Because either have a blended family and they want to ensure their kids are going to get what they're wanting them to get.
Got it.
Because they don't know. I mean, their spouse might remarry. And if they get remarried, you can guarantee that will is going to be useless.
Yeah. I always say when money comes into play.
Yeah.
Things
Well, I mean,
change.
there's just so many things. Like a will can be completely set aside once someone passes away. And then also when that person gets remarried, that spouse can just say, I don't care what's in the will. I'm a spouse. I deserve assistance because I was that person's spouse.
Got it.
And it doesn't matter.
And, I was wondering about that when you have a married couple and they get divorced and they have life insurance or something like that. And I guess that would be a good reason also why to have the trust actually own all policies too, because so you don't have to go back and change anything.
Because then the trustee has the right to go back and make that modification to the policy. Yeah.
Exactly.
Change of beneficiaries.
Now, what are the ranges, meaning the cost of your trust?
So when we have that conversation, that initial consultation, if they decide to move forward with us, we go through all the formalities of getting, the retainer agreement, which is a contract to hire us. And we set out the scope of what we're going to do. And the range goes from anywhere from, $1,200 for a single person to do a will. And then it can go up from there. But our very basic trust is going to be $2,500 for a couple. And that's really just when you want to say, look, I have my kids. My kids are all going to get equal things. And that's all we really care about. Very, very vanilla. It's very straightforward. When you get into things like dynasty trusts, businesses, succession planning, those types of things, it can just sort of go up from there.
Got it.
And when we get into, we do things like family limited partnerships. When there's a big family business and you want children to sort of matriculate into the family business, that's when we set up trusts for each of the children. Each child has their own trust. And that really does create very interesting layers and layers and layers that deter litigation
Okay.
against the family member. So
And that's really a big thing.
that's a big thing. Well,
that's the big
yeah,
thing.
that's like for like a family owns a car dealership or something like really big like that. Then we'll get into family limited partnerships where there's multiple trust, there's limited partner, general partner, all those types of things. It's really complicated stuff, but when a family's got a lot of things,
you have to
they have a lot of things to lose. So
you got to protect
it's a very small fee when you look at the big picture of what could happen.
Exactly. Well, and I think that's what's important. I'm happy you said that, is that it's really making sure everybody understands what's at stake if they don't.
And it's a one-time thing.
And it's a one-time. It's a one-time thing.
One and done.
Yep.
And I'm happy to review anything with a client of ours, and we always, encourage their family members to participate.
Yes.
Or come to the signing if they want to include them. I really enjoy when single moms come and they bring their kids who are going to be their trustees and things, and especially when they're young women and that are going to be the beneficiaries, because I try to explain to them, like, look, when you get married, don't take these things out of your trust. Keep them in your trust. And when they're young men, and I say, when you get married and your wife's telling you she wants the big shiny things, come to me and I'll show you ways to keep the money coming back into your trust if things don't work out.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, once again, can you tell everybody how to get in contact with you?
So the best way to reach me is at nataliegreen.com. And you can also call our office at 770-609-9529. And on Instagram, I am Legal Ninja.
Wow. Well, thank you so much.
Ninja?
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Natalie, for joining us today on More Money, No Problems. Again, this has been an eye-opener to a lot of us.
It's always a pleasure.
Yeah,
I love hanging out with you all the time. You know that.
You've shed a light on a lot of things. Again, More Money, No Problems with attorney Natalie Green. Signing out.